Hi everyone. In this video, I want to talk about interrelated topics dealing with our push for sovereignty and nationhood, forming a kingdom, going back to the original way of life, pure and original, returning to the source, the creator, and leaving behind Babylon. And this is at the root of all movements regarding following the Most High, keeping the word of the Most High, and understanding, realizing the truth of the prophecies. Now, when I say the root of it, is that in order for us to achieve our objectives, the Most High established institutions for us to move through. And I discussed that through the 4 pillars in one of my previous videos. Well, actually 2 previous videos. Imperial Ethiopian World Federation Hebrew Israelite pillar replaces EWF, which is the Ethiopian World Federation, which is a clip from the video titled Restoring the Hebrew Israelite Kingdom in Ethiopia, Rastafari Movement. I urge y'all to definitely check those videos out. Now, when it comes to the Crown Council of Ethiopia, which is one of the pillars, this is a petition to the Crown Council. As you can see right now, we have 620 signatures. We are very close to reaching the 1,000 mark. Once that happens, the petition will be sent to the President of the Crown Council of Ethiopia, Prince Ermias Sali Selassie Haile Selassie. Now, as the title says, let the Ethiopian crown begin to serve its people again. The line of Judah hath prevailed. This is the first step towards the push to the return and restoration of the constitutional monarchy of Ethiopia, which is the monarchy of Israel, because as I discussed in my previous videos, and I'll talk in this video about His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I, conquering line of the tribe of Judah, is a descendant of King David through the line of Solomon and Queen Sheba. He sat on David's throne. So by default, he is king of Israel. Now, this petition is very important because you may hear about all the different Hebrew Israelite camps, but how many of them are talking about a return to becoming a kingdom again? You know, the nationhood status of us having our own national identity, being part of a kingdom. Right now, it's just talk, but it's time for us to walk the walk, and steps like this is the concrete steps that is going to allow us to reach the promised land, to finally get there, to overcome all the hurdles. Now, starting at the top, I'm going to discuss about what the petition says. At this time, when the issues concerning people of African descent are under the microscope, it is imperative that the fractious nature of the global black community at present is not exploited by those willing to uphold prejudices, ideologies, statutes, and policies that seek to undermine the empowerment of black people and frustrate and stagnate any lasting improvements that have arisen owing to global protests concerning the killing of George Floyd by white police officers in Minnesota, USA, and other issues relating to inequalities faced by blacks. This petition proposes that the Crown Council of Ethiopia can deliver a unifying voice within the global black community, as it is free from the vestiges of modern day politics and whose leaders are not tainted with acts that undermine their integrity. This is especially needed as many black politicians are seemingly hard pressed to vouchsafe their integrity, as many are part of a system that initiates and perpetuates inequalities facing black people globally. The Crown Council of Ethiopia represents a unifying cultural and political symbol in the pages of Ethiopian history, and the last known monarch of this empire did stand for and advocate on behalf of African and other oppressed peoples on June 30th, 1936. This petition respectfully calls on the Crown Council of Ethiopia to be the voice of black people. Consequently, the world will once again hear the unifying and impartial voice of an ancient African political system that will lend weight to the global deliberations, seeking to bring an end to the injustices and inequalities meted out to people of African descent. This is very important because right now it's clear that in order to get an audience before the world stage, it's going to be important to come before the United Nations. Their General Assembly has all the nations of the earth gathered together, which we know is in prophecy. The link is right up here. If you don't see a link, the info box that appears right here with a link, then you can always go down below to the description box, and in the description will be a link to the change.org page so that you can go ahead and sign the petition so that we can get this to 1,000. In Joel 3:2 it says, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. Now, I talked in my previous video dealing with the four pillars about the tents of Judah. Now, I highlight how the tents of Judah are scattered to the four corners of the earth. Primarily, we often deal with the transatlantic slave trade, as it's easy to identify through the Deuteronomy 28 curses, how the people will be taken on ships. So we know that it's clear that the descendants of those slaves are Israelites. But there were also other trades, slave trades, other captivities that happened to Judah, and we know Israel as well, making up the other tribes, have also been scattered. So this affects not just African Americans or Afro Mexicans or Dominicans or Jamaicans and Haitians and so forth. No, even people on the other side of the hemisphere. Because as we know, there was also something called blackbirding. Blackbirding, it says, involves the coercion of people through deception or kidnapping to work as slaves or poorly paid laborers in countries distant from their native land. Now, the blackbirding specifically affected Pacific Islanders, people from Papua New Guinea, as you see, South Sea Islanders, Solomon Islands, Melanesians, who it says Fiji Islanders were affected. It also affected Aboriginal Australians. So we could see that our people, the Israelites, globally were scattered. And this connects directly with Joel 3:2. I will also gather all nations and will bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. Did we not just see how in the transatlantic slave trade, blackbirding, people were taken from their land and were forced into indentured servitude, forced into slavery, you name it, but they were scattered. We were scattered to the four corners of the earth. And we have been continually oppressed. But originally, we were a kingdom. But afterwards, our land has been parted. Our people divided, speaking different tongues. Now, this is very important. It's key because, as I said, it's not just the transatlantic slave trade. It's not just, blackbirding. We also had, other slave trades that were happening that brought our people not only just to different parts of Asia, but different parts of Europe, just globally. We're scattered. So this is why we need a unifying voice, as it says in that petition, as it says, and will plead with them there for my people. So now, obviously, plead, can also mean judge. So we see if we go to Joel 3 and we look at the meaning of plead, it'll give you the Hebrew word, is to judge, govern, government. This goes back to the Crown Council of Ethiopia, which is a government in exile. So we see here judge, govern. Before the United Nations, we see. So here's an image that I created, and it has some information that I've been compiling regarding Babylon and the United Nations. So, as it's titled, Destruction of Babylon, Collapse of White Supremacy. Babylon, if we take the word apart etymologically, Babylon or Babal one of its meanings in Hebrew is confusion. Now, Babylon used to be the capital of the ancient Babylonian Empire that destroyed the kingdom of Israel and took most of the Israelites into slavery. Sounds familiar? Well, this happened thousands of years ago before Europeans arrived in Africa. Ancient Babylon was eventually destroyed long ago, but it was later reborn, and we know it now as the New World Order, which is globalism. Now, obviously, when I say it sounds familiar, it's reminiscent of the transatlantic slave trade, how the people's land, where they were living in after Jerusalem was destroyed and they were scattered to other parts of Africa, later they would be attacked again and taken into slavery. So we see history repeating itself. It says right here, all the world powers under one rule, yet they have their own heads, and they sometimes fight with each other, yet they still have the same body, which is the United Nations. Every major recognized country is part of the United Nations, except Vatican City, the home of the Pope and the Catholic Church, which is called the Holy See. In Latin, is called Sancta Sedis, Holy Chair. The chair is also called the Seat of the Dragon. And from this, this is actually from Revelations. In the book of Revelations 13, chapter 13, verse 2, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. On top of all of this is Babylon, known as the great city in the Bible. Book of Revelations, chapter 18, verse 10, standing afar off for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. The United Nations headquarters where all nations gather is in New York City, which is in America. All the nations are part of the new Babylonian Empire, with the capital being America. The new Babylonian Empire has lost its power to stop the Israelites as of 2019 because the 400-year curse of the Israelites ended. The final blow to destroy the new Babylon Empire is the second Exodus, which is the migration of a chosen number of Israelites out of Babylon, which is why Babylon will try to prevent the Israelites from leaving. However, their time is over and nothing can stop the people of the Most High from coming together. Now, if we see right here, it says the United Nations is where all countries gather. We know this. We see some images right here at the bottom of the United Nations and the General Assembly and how heads of states and heads of different countries speak before all the nations of the earth. Now, it says in Revelations chapter 18, verse 21, and a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall the great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. Where do these primary meetings take place? As it says, in America. America is the center of globalism. The United Nations has other headquarters in other parts of the world, but the primary headquarters is in New York City. Now, why this is important? Again, because the United Nations is the intergovernmental body whereby all nations gather together, it connects directly with Joel 3:2. I will also gather all nations and will bring them into the valley of Jehoshaphat. So all of this is interconnected. It's all interrelated. So we can see with the state of Palestine is recognized by 138 of the 193 United Nations member states. So as far as it being completely globally recognized as a country, it's not. Yet it's still able to come before the United Nations to and the United Nations gives it an audience. And as we see right here, the United Nations is where all the nations gathered, as it talks about in Joel chapter 3, verse 2. I will gather all the nations and will bring them into the valley of Jehoshaphat. Now, as far as the valley of Jehoshaphat, that's something that, I could really delve in another video because that's also very important. But just to highlight the point is that His Imperial Majesty was part of the builders of the United Nations and forming the United Nations. So we see that it's now a forum whereby all the nations of the earth come together. And as we see, even though Palestine is not fully recognized as a nation, as this video shows, in 2022, they were given permission to be able to speak before the General Assembly, which is, all the nations that have come together.
To Palestine and to invite him to address the assembly.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, Your Excellency Chaba Korochi, President of the General Assembly, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, heads and members of delegations, may the peace of God be upon you. I am addressing you today on behalf of more than 14 million Palestinians whose fathers and ancestors have lived the tragic Nakba 74 years ago, and they are still living the spillovers of this Nakba, which is a humiliation for the whole humanity, and especially for those who have conspired, planned, and executed this heinous crime.
So we see that, he was, starts going in onto, the injustices that the Palestinians are facing in that region against the Ashkenaz people. But like I said before, at the end of the day, during that in that forum, he's able to give the speech before all nations so that they can hear, to put the records, to set the record straight. It's very important that we're able to come before the United Nations in order to do the same. This is going to be something very important. And when we look at the scriptures, it lines up. And what I mean is that when we see that what is taking place in the prophecies relates to the actual events that are happening real time right now, a lot of people, they don't make the correlation, they don't make the connection. We've become so short-sighted and desensitized. We're just living life like a dream. We're not taking it serious like we should, taking the prophecies serious like we should. Those are our marching orders of what we need to do. And now I'm going to make it clear by relating it in everyday terms, just as simple as the way of life. It's important that we understand our Creator has order and structure. Nothing is done without a purpose. When you look at Zechariah 12, it says the Most High will use the house of David to rally the people, as Elohim, as the angel of Yah before us. So let's take a look at the verse. And that is Zechariah 12. So we see here in Zechariah 12:7. Actually, we can increase the size so that we can see it. There's a lot of verses that could be touched upon, and I'm going to start getting into these other verses as well. I've been basically highlighting these verses in a lot of the videos, but we're going to touch into another dimension of it, or perhaps a dimension we've already touched, but expound more into it. So we're going to take a look at this 8th verse right here. In that day shall Yah defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David, and the house of David shall be as Elohim, as the angel of Yah before them. So, we're going to take a look really, this is very important. And so is the 7th verse here, too. I really want to highlight this, and I talked about in the video the importance of the 4 pillars. These are the 4 pillars to restoring the kingdom of Israel and Judah, obviously, to make it the United Kingdom of Israel, because as we know, the kingdom was split into the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. Israel and Judah will become one kingdom, the kingdom of Yisrael or Israel, the original United Kingdom of the Most High. The four pillars are the Crown Council of Ethiopia, which we can see the coat of arms right here. CHS1, this would be the Church of Haile Selassie I, the founding chapter 1. But as we know, this is also inclusive of all the chapters, of course, because the Church of Haile Selassie I has locales not only in Jamaica, which is primary HQ, but also in New York and London, and we have other locales in parts of the Caribbean as well. And as I said, this right here is the symbol. You have the IEWF, which stands for the Imperial Ethiopian World Federation Incorporated, and here's its symbol right here. And then we have the fourth pillar, which is the tents of Judah. All the diaspora that have been scattered to the four corners of the earth. As it says in Zechariah 12:7, Yah also shall say the tents of Judah first. There's more to it, but I want to highlight the four pillars, and I have a video dedicated to them on my page. And the tents of Judah are descendants of Israelites from the kingdom of Judah that were enslaved during the transatlantic slave trade. Most are living in the Americas, North, South, Central, and Caribbean, but there are also Israelites that are scattered, as it says, to the four corners of the earth, not only of Judah, but also of Israel. So that being Europe, Asia, Oceania, like Australia, and all over the world, we have been scattered. But again, as it says, it's the tents of Judah that the Most High says will save, keyword first. These are the four pillars are going to be key to restoring the United Kingdom of Israel and Ethiopia. Now, to go back to the page, why this is important. The inhabitants of Jerusalem represents the church and also obviously the land. But outside of the land, who represents Jerusalem? The church. We can see this in verses, and I'm going to get into that. But before I start to dive into that, to highlight this aspect here also, the house of David shall be as God, or as Elohim. We see this represented through the Crown Council of Ethiopia. The coat of arms of the Ethiopian Empire is what the Crown Council uses. It's the Ethiopian government interregnum. After the illegitimate coup, all succeeding governments, how can we consider them to be legitimate when there was never any sort of effort to restore the monarchy, to get the appeal or the vote of the people? What do they want to see? Well, during the Derg occupation, there was a complete censorship campaign against the royal family to paint them in a negative light. And most people who were supporters of the royal family were killed, persecuted, harassed, tortured, imprisoned, or had to flee from Ethiopia. So when all of this is happening, then what becomes of the nation? What becomes of the empire? So we see that Jerusalem, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, are represented through the Church of Haile Selassie I. And we see the house of David represented through the Crown Council of Ethiopia. Now it says, and he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David, and the house of David shall be as Elohim, as the angel of Yah before them. We can clearly see how it says that the house of David is going to be an important factor. Yet, when we listen to some Hebrew Israelites or some Rastafarian camps, they don't really discuss the house of David. It's either with some Rastafarian camps, it's just His Imperial Majesty, Haile Selassie I, and him alone. And with some Hebrew Israelite camps, they don't want to deal with His Imperial Majesty or any royals, for that matter, of from the Solomonic dynasty, from the house of David. You know, they think we've moved on past that, and that's not true. Okay, so we see in 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 25, reference to the covenant that the Most High made with King David, that he would always have an heir to sit upon the throne. It says, "Therefore now, Yah, Elohim of Israel, keep with thy servant David, my father, that thou promise him, saying, There shall not fail thee a man in my sight to sit on the throne of Israel, so that thy children take heed to their way, that they walk before me as thou hast walked before me." So we see that it was important that the person sitting upon the throne obeyed and followed the Most High. And we know, and I discussed this in my previous videos, how after the reign of Solomon, the kingdom would be split because Solomon, during the later years of his life, started to go after idols. And as a result, the kingdom split. And his descendants, some of them would also go after other idols. And as a result, the nation of Israel would fall under captivity, and eventually the capital of Jerusalem for the kingdom of Judah was destroyed, and the people were scattered and eventually taken into captivity. However, not all of the people were taken into captivity. Some people remained, and that land eventually would be assimilated or brought into Ethiopia as Ethiopia's boundaries expanded. We also see that King Solomon had a son with Queen Sheba whose name was Menelik. He did walk before the Most High righteously, as I discussed in the Kibra Nagas. And it talks about how the glory of the Most High went from King Solomon to King Menelik, so that to keep the promise, as it says right here, that there shall not fail a man to sit on the throne of Israel. This is also confirmed in 1 Chronicles 17:23-27. It says, "Therefore now, Yah, let the thing that thou hast spoken concerning thy servant and concerning his house be established forever, and do as thou hast said. Let it even be established that thy name may be magnified forever, saying, Yah of hosts is the Elohim of Israel, even a Elohim to Israel, and let the house of David thy servant be established before thee." Again, we're seeing the house of David. "For thou, O my Elohim, hast told thy servant that thou wilt build him an house. Therefore thy servant hath found in his heart to pray before thee. Now, Yah, thou art Elohim, and hast promised this goodness unto thy servant. Now therefore let it please thee to bless the house of thy servant, that it may be before thee forever. For thou blessest, O Yah, and it shall be blessed forever." Now, some people may be like, well, this is David speaking. What does the Most High say? Well, to answer that, we can go to Psalms 89:35-36. "Once have I sworn by my holiness that I will not lie unto David. His seed shall endure forever, and his throne as the sun before me." So, and then we also see here, even in 2 Samuel, chapter 7. So we see here where the Most High speaking, as it says clearly right here in verse 8. "Now therefore, so shalt thou say unto my servant David, Thus saith Yah of hosts, I took thee from the sheepcote, from following the sheep, to be ruler over my people, over Israel." I'm just going to scroll down to highlight the part where it says, "And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. He will build an house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men." But my mercy shall not depart away from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away before thee. And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. So we see that the Most High, as we see right here, clearly establishes a covenant with David that his kingdom, his throne, will be established forever. Now, we're going to dive deeper into the meaning of this, but like I said, I just want to explain that because we see some people talking as if there is no longer a house of David. And as we can see throughout the scriptures, it's mentioned that there is a house of David. Particularly of note, as it says right here, for thou, O my Elohim, hast told thy servant that thou wilt build him an house. Therefore thy servant hath found in his heart to pray before thee. So now we see that the house of David, as it says right here, is established, will be established forever, which the Most High, as it says, is confirmed in 2 Samuel. Solomon goes on to confirm it in 1 Kings 8:25. So we see that this house is established from the house of David to the Solomonic dynasty, which passes on to Ethiopia, which is why it's also known as the Ethiopian Solomonic dynasty. But we see it's also reestablished further through the Crown Council of Ethiopia. As we see right here, actually, pull that up. Crown Council of Ethiopia, right here. And we can see that it's a constitutional body that originated within the Ethiopian Empire. And if we look right here, we see that the first president was established in 1941. Now, His Imperial Majesty is coronated November 2nd, 1930. So the constitutional body that His Imperial Majesty passed is what puts the Crown Council in effect. Thereby, when it talks about in, let's see, Wrong Chronicles about establishing the house of David, we see His Imperial Majesty renew the establishment under the banner of the Crown Council of Ethiopia, which His Imperial Majesty establishes. Now, we see some people will go ahead and try to make it former, but there is no former. Everything that the Most High, as it says, as we see in Isaiah 55, chapter 55, verse 11, so shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I sent it. Now we see how the Most High talks about he will establish the covenant forever. So there is no former Ethiopian empire. So just to make a correlation, we see as it talks about confirming and establishing the house of David, we see that this is done in 2 Samuel 7:16 by the Most High, where it says, and thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. And we know, as it says in Isaiah 55:11, so shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I sent it. So this is directly from the word of the Most High, that the kingdom and the house would be established forever. Keyword, forever. It's not something to where, for a time or for a generation or for a century or a millennium, forever. And this is one of the primary parts that a lot of people, especially Hebrew Israelites, are not picking up on, that it's forever. So what are you thinking now? Now after Christ, it's just disappeared, it's gone? No. And we see how it says in Psalms 87. I'm going to touch upon this because you're going to see this is really going to open up a lot of people's eyes, provided they have the Spirit. Because as it says in Joel 2:28, that the Most High is pouring out his Spirit upon the children in the latter days. In these last days, but it's important that you're receiving the Spirit of the Most High and that you are not blaspheming against it, but you are receiving it, because the Spirit, and as we know, the Holy Ghost puts all things into remembrance. So it's definitely going to be an awakening. But again, for a remnant, and I'm going to touch upon this as well, but to also touch on verses, because I know people like to have the verses, and that's very important. It says, so we see in Acts 2:17, it says, and it shall come to pass in the last days, keyword, last days. These are the last days. We are at the end game right now. This is the final judgment we're coming upon. It says, saith Elohim, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. So we see the spirit coming upon people. Now, when we look in John 14:26, it says, but the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things and bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I have said unto you. So now we see that the Spirit, the Holy Ghost, is going to be coming into people in the last days and bringing all these things into remembrance. The remembrance of what? What are we going to be coming into the remembrance of? Don't we already hear a lot about Jesus Christ, even though, Jesus couldn't have been his name because the letter J was invented, is something new. It's an English word. The Hebrew, the ancient Israelites, they weren't using J like the English people do. So coming to remembrance of the truth, of the house of David, of Yeshua HaMashiach, of Isaiah 9:6. Who is this child that is born unto us that is called Everlasting Father? Because as I talked about in my previous videos, it cannot be referring to Yeshua HaMashiach because he never sits on the throne of David on earth. So who is this child? So it's putting all these things into remembrance that we come into the understanding and come into the realization of the truth. So as I said, when we look in Isaiah 55:11, when it says that the word is not going to return to him void, and we see that it specifically says in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 16, and thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee, thy throne shall be established forever. Who is he referring to? Well, I mean, if we look into like the full context of it, he's referring to King David. As it says right here, go and tell my servant David, thus saith Yah, shalt thou build me an house for me to dwell in? So as it keeps on going on, we see that he's talking to David. This house, this royal line of David, this kingdom, as it says, and when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. So again, we see in Psalms 87, chapter 87, verse 5, and of Zion it shall be said this, and that man was born in her, and the highest himself shall establish her. Establish who? We just got done talking. The house of David. Now we see his imperial majesty carrying this out. Just as we saw Solomon build a house, just as we saw the Most High saying he's going to establish it, because obviously the word works through men and women, through people. That's why it says in Isaiah 55 that my word shall not return unto me void. What do you think it's doing? Is it just rustling the leaves? Is it just moving the branches on trees? Is it just moving dirt? No, it's moving people. So as we see when the Spirit of the Father comes upon his elect, the child, the one that it says right here in Psalms 87, and of Zion it shall be said this, and that man was born in her. His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I is carrying out the work and the will of the Most High, because the Most High is moving through him, being the Christ that sits upon David's throne. As we see here, the imperial dignity shall remain perpetually attached to the line of Haile Selassie I, descendant of King Salih Selassie, whose line descends without interruption from the dynasty of Menelik I, son of Queen of Ethiopia, the Queen of Sheba, and King Solomon of Jerusalem. So we see all of this being fulfilled and carried out. The Crown Council of Ethiopia is the government, is the Ethiopian Empire in exile, but it's still being run, it's still being governed. Actually, to go back, so we see that the Crown Council of Ethiopia was established, and it is not a former Ethiopian empire, it is the Ethiopian Empire in exile. And when they say that it's been abandoned, it has not been abandoned, because we still see the leader of the president of the Crown Council of Ethiopia still working together with different political organizations and the Rastafarian movement. So it is still working together with the diaspora and with, like I said, the four pillars are working together. So that's why we see it being fulfilled, Isaiah chapter 55 verse 11, that the word is going to accomplish that which he said it to accomplish. It's not going to return to the Most High void. So His Imperial Majesty establishes the Crown Council of Ethiopia, just like the Most High establishes the House of David. The Crown Council of Ethiopia is the House of David in this day and age. During our lifetime, this is the House of David. Now, to go back, like I said, I just wanted to highlight that. But another question that may pop up, people may be like, well, if it says that the Most High told David that as long as his seed obey him, he will always have someone to sit on the throne, then why do we not see the constitutional monarchy reigning in Ethiopia today? Well, this connects with Genesis 49:10. As it says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. So what does this signify? So Shiloh represents the fulfillment of prophecy. The fulfillment of prophecy in that regarding the Christ sitting upon David's throne. His Imperial Majesty accomplishes that. Being the anointed, he sits upon David's throne. And as the anointed one and as a Christ, he also is the Messiah. And we see in Daniel, let's see, take a look at that. Chapter 9:26, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and until the end of the war desolations are determined. Now we see that we have two Messiahs. We have the Messiah Yeshua HaMashiach that comes, also known as Jesus Christ, and we see later he is cut off, and that after the crucifixion and the resurrection, he ascends once he finishes his testimony and the works that it was prophesied that he would accomplish. Then we see his Imperial Majesty, the Christ in the kingly character, who had the Spirit of the Father upon him, sitting on David's throne, as it was prophesied in Acts, where it says, men and brethren, let me freely speak. And this is Acts chapter 2, verse 29 through 30. Men and brethren, let me freely speak unto you of the patriarch David, that he is both dead and buried, and his sepulchre is with us unto this day. Therefore, being a prophet, knowing that Yah had sworn with an oath to him, that of the fruit of his loins, according to the flesh, he would raise up Christ to sit on his throne. So we see his Imperial Majesty accomplishing this, November 2nd, 1930. The Christ sits upon David's throne. So we see this aspect fulfilled. And this is what brings us to Genesis 49:10, where it says, until Shiloh come. So that's why it says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet. As we see a lawgiver, as it says, His Imperial Majesty gave Ethiopia two constitutions. The last one, most recent one being the 1955 Constitution. So that is law. So we see he provided law. The government was upon his shoulders, fulfilling Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. So we see that being accomplished. So it says, it shall not depart, the scepter, which is, government or authority, until Shiloh come. So that represents his Imperial Majesty, the Christ sitting on David's throne. Now, we see that His Imperial Majesty, as I said, would go on to establish the House of David through the Crown Council of Ethiopia, which is the House of David, modern day. And then he, as it says in Daniel chapter 9, verse 26, would be cut off, and that afterwards we see the Derg taking over. His Imperial Majesty, they set up a sham funeral saying that he passes away, but we get no body. The skeleton that they show does not even match the height of His Imperial Majesty. There are different contradicting statements from people of government and so forth saying that the different ways His Imperial Majesty died. So there's no agreement on how he died, whether it's he choked and he passed and he died, or there was a bomb, or he passed away of prostate cancer. There's no legitimate statement given that is actually fact checked and proven to be authentic of there actually being a body of His Imperial Majesty. So the whole funeral is a sham. So His Imperial Majesty, and this fulfills the scripture of. So we see in Psalm 16, verse 10 says, "For thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither wilt thou suffer thine Holy One to see corruption." So we see that there would not be a body. Just as Yeshua the Messiah ascended, so did His Imperial Majesty. He came, He accomplished the prophecies that were mentioned that He would accomplish as the Father on earth, and then He ascended. So we see this also through Daniel, through Genesis 49:10. So I wanted to again to highlight the importance of the establishing the throne and the house of David, as it says, would be established. Now, to go back to Zechariah 12, as it says, "And the house of David shall be as Elohim, as the angel of Yah before them." Again, I want to give a back story a little bit into that. I'm going to go more into detail in another video, but I want to give a backdrop into that to highlight that this thing is an everlasting covenant. Anyone with common sense should know, and if not, just Google it, what everlasting means. It means forever. So what makes people think that there's no longer a house of David when the Most High clearly throughout several different books says that the house of David is forever? The manner in which it runs may slightly change, but as far as it still being established before the Most High as an authority, that's not going to change. So as we see right here, the house of David shall be as Elohim, as the angel of Yah before them. This is the rallying point. When you think of an angel obviously symbolizes a messenger. So who sends the message? It's the house of David. What is the message? The message is the rallying point. It's the banner by which we can all get behind and be moving as one people together under the Most High. He's leading us, obviously, but He puts institutions into place. So to get further deeper into this, we can connect this verse directly with Daniel chapter 12. It says in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, "And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book." So we see here in this quote by His Imperial Majesty, he says, "These young people face a world beset with the most effectively organized program of deceptive propaganda and of thinly screened operations ever known. Even Yeshua prophesies of it, saying, For then shall be great tribulation such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor ever shall be." So we're lining up to this point, as it says in Daniel 12. So it says, this lines up with according as I just read in Daniel 12:1. "And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time." So we see that there's one final battle that is to come. That is going to be the battle of battles, the last battle, before the Most High sets up His everlasting dominion. Because we know the Most High runs everything, but we still see that the beast, or Satan, still has in some form or fashion, pull over these nations. They're still doing whatever they want to do. We still see propaganda, wars going on. So the time to the complete deliverance has not been fulfilled yet. But we see that it lines up with Michael coming and his advent, just as we saw the advent of the Son, Yeshua Mashiach, we saw the advent of the Father through his imperial majesty. Now we see that there is going to be one more, where this one being represented through Michael. And Michael is really also very symbolic of the amalgamation of faith, because we see Michael referenced in Revelations where he fights Satan and casts him down. But, to really understand the meaning of it, it's more of during that time period where you had the rise of fascism, the rise of white supremacy going against people, the Israelites, people who have faith, standing for the line of Judah. And that mentality cast down white power, supremacy, that construct. Okay, so to put things into perspective, what I'm referring to is Revelations chapter 12, verse 7, where it says, "And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought it and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him." And some people will say sometimes that, the different interpretations they have for it. But the way that I see it symbolically is referencing the war of ideologies. We actually see, it's coming onto the battlefield, obviously, through the Second Ethiopian Italian War. But I'm saying it also takes place mentally, in the mind. It's a war for the mind, and the war takes place in the physical form, manifests through weapons and violence and people dying. And it's interesting to note that we could see this through an image that was actually commissioned by His Imperial Majesty, Haile Selassie I. So people can't say His Imperial Majesty was saying that he's not the one of prophecy. He did it through actions, and actions speak louder than just words alone. Because it's always important that, as we see when we talked about Isaiah chapter 55, verse 11, that there are works, to be done. Because as it says, that the word should not return unto him void. So these words, what is it causing? It's causing movement, it's causing action. So His Imperial Majesty, he let his works speak for themselves. So he commissioned a painting that directly connects to Armageddon. In that we could see the correlation in Revelations 12, we could see the correlations of Revelations 19 and 17 and so forth, because we see His Imperial Majesty sitting surrounded by lions, right? But also we see angels. We see there are angels that are falling down from heaven. Just the same thing that's saying in Revelations chapter 7. Now, when you look at it, the angels that are falling down around His Imperial Majesty, the way I'm symbolically referencing and interpreting this as, was a war at the time when you had the height of white supremacy through Nazism, fascism, all of this nationalistic pride, colonialism, and so forth happening. Africa in subjugation, black people in subjugation. Whether you're in America, whether you're in Jamaica, wherever you are, the Europeans, the children of Japheth, I should say, were in control. And here we have an Ethiopian, the only sovereign African nation, kingdom, empire, fighting for the liberation of black peoples globally. Because it may only seem like they're fighting for just themselves, but no. If Ethiopia lost, all black people globally lost. That one light that was on a hill, they were trying to extinguish. That black people would be completely in subjugation globally. But Satan was not able to prevail. And this is why I say, and I'm going to actually I'm gonna play a video that also does a good point in highlighting this. Like the when I talk about the war, it's not only a physical war, but it's a mental war. Because even now to this day, we also see it through when people talk about mental slavery. And this is a video.
But the battle for a believer is fighting the demons that have literally taken over the thoughts of people in the world. And the passage to think about is 2 Corinthians 10. The weapons of our warfare are not fleshly. We can't fight this spiritual warfare with fleshly weapons. Pragmatism isn't going to work. The weapons of our warfare are not fleshly. They have to be mighty to the pulling down of strongholds. So if we're going to get into spiritual battle, we're going to have to realize that this battle is about tearing down spiritual strongholds. And the word there is the word for prison, castle, fortress, and tomb, massive stone edification. So here's what spiritual war is. We're coming against these fortifications. Now, what are they? The next verse says, even logismos, ideas, ideologies, theories, philosophies, psychologies, religions. So we're battling against ideologies that have become people's fortresses and will end up being their tombs. And the real spiritual war is smashing down the fortresses that people are captive in and then bringing every thought captive to Christ.
So, as he said there, it's about the philosophies and the ideologies because those things can last longer than a person being dead. You know, a person that may have spread Nazism, he may be dead, but you still see the vestiges through neo-Nazism being spread in different parts of Europe and America and so forth. So those things last longer than the flesh and the blood because they are more intangible, they're spiritual, or they're mental, philosophical, ideologies. Those things also need to be destroyed. And we see that at the height of it, because like we see now, neo-fascism, neo-Nazism. When it was just before the neo, when it was just Nazism, when it was just fascism, those things were destroyed and defeated. They were defeated first mentally, and then they were defeated on the battlefield. Because black people were signing up for the war effort in Ethiopia. We were not just sitting back as just bystanders. And we could see this. There's still images to this day. You see right here, in Harlem, forgotten fight to save Africa's last uncolonized nation from Mussolini. Ethiopian volunteers register here. There were African Americans that were going to Ethiopia to fight. And they tried to suppress it, but there were African Americans and there were other black people, whether it was from the Caribbean and so forth, and other parts of Africa that were going to fight. And we kept fighting and fighting till finally we managed to break through and we were able to defeat Italy in 1941. So this is going back to where it says in Revelations chapter 7 about the war in heaven. It's the war in the mind. Philosophically, mentally, ideological, it takes place in the mind and then it transfers to the battlefield. And the battlefield, they were defeated. So now to touch back on to Michael, as I said, being the amalgamation of faith, we saw him in different advents in the book of Daniel, in the book of Revelations, and then, in Daniel, the last chapter of Daniel, Daniel chapter 12, we see him standing up in the advent this time of a prince. In this manifestation, he is a representation and represent in this manifestation he's represented as a prince for the children of thy people, for the Israelites. As we see with the Crown Council of Ethiopia, which it says will be as in the angel of Yah before the people. And as I'll show, we understand that Michael is an archangel. So we see in Jude chapter 9 verse 1 it says, "Yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, Yah rebuke thee." So it tells you right here who Michael is. He's an archangel. But in the Advent, just as we see, with the Father bestowing his spirit into his elect, his imperial majesty, that Michael also will be in the advent of the flesh and blood, as it says, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. He shall stand up in that time. So we see there's a direct correlation between Michael as a prince, and then we see the house of David as the angel of Yah before the people. So we see that this spirit of Michael rests in the house of David because, as we see when we look when we look at the Crown Council of Ethiopia, the modern day house of David, who is the president? Prince Eremias Sali Selassie, a descendant of His Imperial Majesty. We also have Zera Yaqub Amha Selassie, who, you know, as a descendant of His Imperial Majesty, is also a prince. So we see that this is fulfilled. It's sometimes also listed as being an emperor, but there was never a full coronation that happened in the Holy Land of Ethiopia. So that's why, you'll still also see him as listed as Crown Prince of Ethiopia. So we see princes running the house of David. And as we see right here, at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people. So his spirit, the representation of Michael, we see through the house of David, as we had the spirit of the Father, the representation of the Father on earth through his imperial majesty. So now to highlight another part in the scriptures would be, so another key component to highlight is regarding the man clothed with linen and with a writer's inkhorn by his side. Because, and this is talked about in Ezekiel chapter 9, 2 through 7. And why this is important is because this is what is happening right now. Because, as we know, for the second Exodus, only a remnant is going to return. This is talked about in the scriptures. In Isaiah chapter 10, verse 22, it says, For though thy people Israel be as the sand of the sea, yet a remnant of them shall return. The consumption decreed shall overflow with righteousness. So just to see this, we understand that there's a lot of Israelites that are scattered across the four corners of the earth. I mean, just looking at Israelites in Brazil, when you look at the descendants of the transatlantic slave trade, I mean, it's well over 20 million that are just living in that one country of Brazil alone, Israelites. So you see, there's millions, hundreds of millions of Israelites scattered across the four corners of the earth, scattered throughout the different countries of Africa, you know, but only a remnant is going to return to Israel. So who are those remnant? Well, in Ezekiel, so who is this remnant? Well, in Ezekiel chapter 9, 2 through 7, it says, And behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate which lieth towards the north, and every man a slaughter weapon in his hand. And one man among them was clothed with linen, with a writer's inkhorn by his side. And they went in and stood beside the brazen altar. And the glory of Elohim of Israel was gone up from the cherub whereupon he was, to the threshold of the house. And he called to the man clothed with linen, which had the writer's inkhorn by his side. And Yah said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. And Yah said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, or, That's since the letter J, that's why I say Jerusalem, but transliteration of it is Jerusalem. And set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. And to the others he said in mine hearing, Go ye after him through the city, and smite. Let not your eyes spare, neither have ye pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house. And he said unto them, Defile the house, and fill the courts with the slain. Go ye forth. And they went forth and slew in the city. Now, there's a lot of important things to touch upon, but just to highlight some of them. So, obviously, we can see that it's talking about people being marked in their foreheads. Now, if you read Revelations, this would stand out. There's a correlation. Why? Because in Revelations chapter 7, verse 3, it says, saying, Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our Elohim, of Yah, the Most High Yah, and their foreheads. Here we see him. It says that when it comes to them slaying people, spare the people that have the mark. Which mark? Well, it says right here, the we till we have sealed the servants of Yah and their foreheads. So the correlation we see is that the people here, they have a mark upon their foreheads, and these are the people that are fed up with the abominations in Israel, particularly through the midst of Jerusalem. Why? Because I'm going to go further into detail how Jerusalem, there's a symbolism to it. Obviously, we know Jerusalem is the capital of the kingdom of Judah after the kingdom of Israel was split in two, but it's also a representation of the church. So to look at it from that angle, we obviously see, the church, the temple represented within ourselves, but there's also, as I talk about the four pillars, one of the pillars is the Church of Haile Selassie I the First. Now, to highlight, when we see that the mark of the forehead is done by the man clothed with the inkhorn, and that following him comes destruction, as the others were given slaughter weapons in their hands to slay the people. We see in Revelations 18, chapter 18, verse 4, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues. Now, so we see that these events are slightly differing from what was going on in the days of Ezekiel. At that day, it was Israel being punished. We also see that the temple or the sanctuary was being punished, because it says, and begin at my sanctuary. This also correlates to 1 Peter 4:17. It says, For the time is come that judgment must begin at the house of Yah. And if it first begin at us, what shall be the end of them that obey not the gospel of Yah? So we see that this correlates, that it's talking, but on in two different eras. Now, in this era that we're living in, we see that the judgment is starting to pass away from us, as we see that the Deuteronomy 28 curses, the 400-year curse is over. We're coming out of that. We also see that now we're entering this transitional period of Zechariah 12, where it talks about how the tents of Judah will be saved first. So now this judgment is passing off the house of the Most High, and now it's going to come upon the nations, as it talks about here in Revelations 18, chapter 18, verse 4, where it says, the Most High says, Come out of her, my people. Come out of where? Come out of Babylon. All these other nations are returning back to the Holy Land of Ethiopia. Now, as I talked about, it says only a remnant, though, will return. Why? Because there are phases in the second Exodus process. You have people that started leaving out prior, even before the 2019, after the end of the 400 years, people have been leaving out of America and moving to Africa during repatriation. We see Jamaicans, some African Americans, and other islanders moving into the land grant that His Imperial Majesty provided in Shashamane, where it was free land. People could come in, have homes built, start farming or start their businesses. So we saw this, but as far as post Deuteronomy 28 400-year curse, we saw people coming in, and I consider that to be the first wave. And then different things started happening to prevent the people from coming out, because as we saw, Ghana put restrictions. You had to have a COVID vaccine in order to enter into the airport. I mean, they start putting these different restrictions up. But to highlight, following that, we see people now deciding, okay, now we're coming into Africa. We decided on leaving Africa. Where do we go? Where is this Holy Land? It's not in the place that there's that the Ashkenaz people are trying to convince us it's at. It's somewhere in Africa. So it's narrowing it down, coming to the realization that it's Ethiopia, but even though you still have other people that, believe it's in other locations. So this second phase, or even still this first phase, is people navigating their way through Africa, finding a place, building, and building a homeland for themselves, a base, a community. Now, only a remnant, though, is going to be successful in actually reaching the Holy Land and building. Following that, other events are going to take place, and it's going to lead to eventually an even bigger wave of Israelites now moving into the Holy Land. But the first wave of it really is going to be a small remnant, and this is prophesied. And it's also prophesied that it's going to come a larger wave. Where do I get this from? In Revelations chapter 20, it says, starting at verse 7, "And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city, and fire came down from Yah out of heaven, and devoured them." Now, we see, following these events, this is all connected, that, and this is what I'm talking about, this is the war. The camp of the saints is the remnant that come out of Babylon and go into the land, the Holy Land, as it says, the beloved city. So the Israelites, the remnant, those that come out, and even those that are grafted into Israel and enter into the beloved city, the Holy Land. Support that you're in the right area, because people are getting scattered all across the continent, but go to the right area. That this is going to be a remnant. You're going to have other people in other areas, but the remnant, the camp of the saints, is going to be in this area, in Ethiopia. And this is where this is going to be a final war that's going to take place. Now, after this war, we see that there's going to be a second wave of an exodus, because, as it says in Isaiah 49, right here, starting at Isaiah chapter 49, verse 17, "Thy children shall make haste, thy destroyers and they that made thee waste shall go forth of thee. Lift up thine eyes round about, and behold, all these gather themselves together and come to thee. As I live, saith Yah, thou shalt surely clothe thee with them all, as with an ornament, and bind them on thee, as a bride doeth. For thy waste and thy desolate places, and the land of thy destruction, shall even now be too narrow by reason of the inhabitants, and they that swallowed thee up shall be far away. The children which thou shalt have, after thou hast lost the others, shall say again in thine ears, The place is too strait for me, give place to me that I may dwell. Then shalt thou say in thine heart, Who hath begotten me these, seeing I have lost my children, and am desolate and captive, and removing to and fro? And who hath brought up these? Behold, I was left alone. These, where had they been? Thus saith Yah our Elohim, Behold, I will lift up mine hand to the Gentiles, and set up my standard to the people. And they shall bring thy sons in their arms, and thy daughters shall be carried upon their shoulders. So now we see that following the war, there will be another exodus whereby more Israelites will be coming out, more children of Israel will be coming out of the west into the land, or the surrounding regions. So we see that it's important for us to realize, if we take note of certain key things, and we're going to touch on all these different things. I know it could be a lot to process. So that's why I always say take notes and, follow along. We see how you have a place that says it's too straight for me, but when you look up that word straight, it's actually narrow. meaning small. So when we go there, some people may be expecting to have a bunch of land. Obviously, when you look up land can be very expensive in Ethiopia. So it's telling you that the area that we're going to be settling in the holy city is going to be a small land, and that's why it's only a remnant that's coming. The Most High does everything for a purpose. So a remnant, the people that have the right mind, the right attitude, as we talked about with the person with the inkhorn, that's paying attention, seeing people that are tired and fed up with this lifestyle, not people that are going to bring the Babylon lifestyle to the holy city, not people that are going to be coming in with the wrong mentality, that have that crab in the barrel mentality, even though Babylon propagates it and forces us sometimes to work against and be counterproductive. Some people, they want to bring that, keep and cling on to that harmful attitudes and bring that sort of drama and problems and self-hatred to the holy city. And it talks about in Ezekiel 20 how the Most High is going to purge those people. So we're not going to see that type, that is not really going to be allowed to fester. It's not going to be allowed to fester in the holy city. It's going to be put out quick. So we're going to see the right people with the right minds and right attitudes starting to come together and reaching into the right area of Ethiopia where they need to be. And it's talked about from there, we're going to see that there's going to be a war, which, as I was talked about in Revelations 20, how the nations are going to gather around the camp of the saints. And following that, there's going to be a major war and they're going to be defeated. Now, to go back to this verse again, we see how, obviously the land is going to be small and our numbers are going to be increasing. We're going to be building and people are going to want even more land. And then following the war, we're going to see that more Israelites, more children of Israel are going to be returning to the land. So, as we talked about, our people be as the sand of the sea, as it talks about in the scriptures, where it says in Isaiah chapter 10, verse 22, for though thy people Israel be as the sand of the sea. So, sand, that's a multitude of people, millions, hundreds of millions of Israelites scattered all across the world, all across the four corners of the earth. So, we're going to see following more Israelites return. So, obviously, that land is not going to be big enough. So we're going to see our people from that point on, we're going to be gaining control. The Most High is going to be putting the control of the earth and into the hand of the saints. As it says, we will be made kings and priests. So we're going to be taking over. And all of this is going to be, the Most High is going to be, obviously, the Most High is going to be reigning over supreme. But we're going to see from that point on the establishment of a new system where we will no longer be at the bottom, we will no longer be the tail, but we will become the head. And this is talked about throughout the scriptures. So I want to highlight this about how it talks about, the Satan's armies being defeated, the Israelites rising up, coming into the land. We see all of this taking place. And as it says, thus saith Yah our Elohim, behold, I will lift up my hand to the Gentiles, and set up my standard to the people, and they shall bring thy sons in their arms, and thy daughters shall be carried upon their shoulders. Well, I talked about in my previous video who the Gentiles are, that the Gentiles are the children of Japheth. So we see all of this being connected. You know what I'm saying? So I want to highlight that so that we can see how, you know, the wave of the Exodus is going to take shape. So in Revelation 5:10 it says, and has made us unto Yah our Elohim kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth. So we see obviously when you're talking about kings and priests, and we see how formerly they're nations, but now as far as who will usurp them when all these nations are defeated in the final war, it will be us, the children of Israel. We will be the ones taking over. The Most High will be placing us in charge. So all of this is connected. When I talk about how, the order will be established, Babylon will be officially destroyed, will be gone forever. there will be a new kingdom, the Most High's kingdom. There will be balance throughout the universe. And all of these things, like I said, are all interconnected. So now we see how, what we need to start doing in order to move forward. I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to go further back to the other chapters that I was discussing, but I'm going to make this into a 2-part series. So I'm going to end on this part, and then in the second part, I'm going to go into detail again regarding the 4 pillars and connecting it to the prophecies.